Hello guys, what's up? It's me, Ewan from What Culture, and I'm here today to talk about Avengers Endgame. Woo! Of all the moments that managed to blow fans' minds in Endgame, Steve Rogers lifting Mjolnir has to be the best. Although teased in Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America finally became worthy enough to wield the hammer and used it to battle Thanos and his hordes in the final act. Hammer in hand, Cap leads the Avengers into battle and lays waste to dozens of Outriders. Even Thor himself can't help but appreciate the moment, even briefly swapping hammers with the God of Thunder, who's in possession of Stormbreaker following the events of Avengers Infinity War. To say it was a spectacle would be putting things lightly, but the moment did raise a few questions too. Namely, how was Steve finally able to wield the weapon after being unable to do so in Age of Ultron? Could he always have wielded it but simply chose not to, or was the enchantment on the hammer lifted given the threat Thor and his allies faced? Numerous theories have emerged in the 2 weeks following Endgame's release, but it's worth taking a more detailed look at the build-up to the moment, the history behind it in the comics, and how it all came together on screen in Steve's last appearance as Captain America. So again, I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here's why Captain America was able to lift Thor's hammer in Avengers Endgame. The history behind Mjolnir is fairly simple, but the magic surrounding it can sometimes verge on the convoluted side. Basically, Mjolnir was forged by dwarven blacksmiths with the Asgardian metal known as Uru. Once it was forged, the All-Father Odin wielded it for a period of time. When the Odinson was deemed worthy, the All-Father enchanted the weapon with a sacred inscription. Whoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. For a long time, the only person worthy enough to wield the hammer was Thor himself. By the time he became a part of Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, that truth only became more evident. However, while Thor was certainly worthier than his colleagues, there was never a shortage of worthy individuals around him. When Steve Rogers re-emerged in Avengers number 4, a path was set that would take the good captain right into the path of Mjolnir. In the comics, Captain America has wielded Mjolnir more than any other figure not to be called Thor. The first occasion came in Thor number 390. Cap was in one of his less amiable periods in his relationship with the US government and had adopted a snazzy black, red and white uniform. Both he and Thor are attacked by the demons of death, and while Thor is overwhelmed, Steve finds it within himself to lift Mjolnir and fight several of the creatures off before sending the weapon back to its rightful owner. The God of Thunder shares his admiration for Steve at the fact he's worthy enough to wield the weapon, just as he did in Avengers Endgame, but it wouldn't be the last occasion where the captain did. Going forward, Rogers would wield Mjolnir again during Fear itself. Rogers had just returned after the inconvenience of being sent back through time after his assassination in the wake of Civil War. It's better if you don't ask, but his time out of action clearly had no impact on his worthiness. Mirroring a similar moment from Avengers Endgame, Steve lifts Mjolnir and repeats those famous 2 words, Avengers Assemble. Oh god, it just feels so great to say out loud. Earth's mightiest heroes then proceed to restore the world to how it was before, one swing at a time. Of course, Cap isn't the only one who's managed to wield Thor's hammer. Through some trickery, Loki has done so dozens of times, even being found worthy at one point in time. The likes of Beta Ray Bill, Storm, and Wonder Woman have all wielded Mjolnir or different variations of the hammer over time, while Superman, yes, the Man of Steel himself, managed to do so as well. However, Kal-El seemingly wasn't found worthy, or at least that's how Thor explained it. The God of Thunder revealed that Odin himself had lifted the enchantment on the hammer so that Supes could use it in the multiverse's hour of need. By the way, the comic that's from is JLA/Avengers, and you should all give it a read because it's bonkers fun. The point is that there's more than one way to wield a hammer, and heroes and villains from both Marvel and DC have done so repeatedly through different means. So, which method did Steve use in Endgame? Prior to the release of Avengers Endgame, a theory started to emerge. Fans had speculated that Steve Rogers may end up wielding a hammer in Endgame, but the prevailing doubt was whether or not the character would be worthy enough to do so. Remember, it was only a few years before that Steve had lied to Tony Stark, his friend and ally, regarding the fate of his own father, while his own dogma, egged on by Stark's reactionary instincts of course, had managed to drive the Avengers apart. Clearly, despite being the Sentinel of Liberty, there was still a lot of red left in Steve's ledger. He's a soldier by trade, a spy working for S.H.I.E.L.D., and while he only wants to do good, might it have been possible that Rogers was found to be unworthy in Age of Ultron because of the events following Winter Soldier? Put it this way, Cap had secretly been doing the bidding of Hydra. Yes, he was completely unaware, of course, and was the man to bring their secret empire crumbling down, but he'd gone on missions that had effectively strengthened the quasi-Nazi terror group. Could it actually have been possible that all those missions were what made Rogers unable to lift the hammer in 2015? Of course, there's also the matter of Steve lying to his friend to bear in mind. By the time he tries to lift Thor's hammer in Age of Ultron, he already knows that the Winter Soldier, Bucky, was responsible for the deaths of Tony's parents. He withholds that information throughout the course of the film, and it's possible that could have been the deciding factor when engaging in the contest to lift Mjolnir. By the time Endgame comes around, however, there's no ill will between either party. Cap has spent a further 5 years fighting for his loved ones after Thanos' snap, and in that moment of pure desperation, some would say determination, Mjolnir finally comes to him. Although Thor Ragnarok established that Thor's powers stem from within and not Mjolnir, the hammer still enabled the God of Thunder to amplify his powers. The original enchantment also still stands, but just as the All-Father lifted the inscription on the hammer in the comics for Superman, could Odin have introduced a caveat that enabled anyone to wield the hammer when its rightful owner was in peril in the MCU? Think about it. When Cap picks up Mjolnir in Endgame, Thor is being decimated by Thanos. The Mad Titan is pushing Stormbreaker right into the God of Thunder's chest, and while it's not the present-day Thor's Mjolnir, it's still fundamentally linked to his being. Sensing that the Odin son is in danger and hearing Rogers' call, it's possible that Mjolnir would have deemed Rogers a suitable owner to help Thor in his hour of need. It's a long shot, but again, it's not without precedent. The only alternative in that scenario would have been for Cap to charge at Thanos with his broken shield, which would have resulted in the deaths of both himself and the Odin son. Mjolnir had to come to Steve to safeguard all of reality. There is a much simpler theory to roll with though, and that's just that Steve Rogers has always been worthy. He was the kid from Brooklyn with a heart of gold who went to war because he couldn't stand bullies. He was selfless, well-intentioned, and a model patriot willing to fight tyranny no matter its source. Of course he'd be worthy enough to wield Mjolnir. In fact, Avengers Endgame director Joe Russo even went so far as to pose the question that maybe the reason why Steve didn't lift Thor's hammer in Age of Ultron was because he didn't want to hurt Thor's feelings, before going on to say that Thor is, quote, very sensitive. I'd agree. In a way, that exact gesture actually exemplifies Steve's own worthiness. Instead of wielding the hammer then and there, he understands how much worthiness defines Thor's entire being. To lift it in a ridiculous drinking contest would have almost been humiliating, so instead he opts to leave it be. That explains why it nudges for just 1 second, because if he wasn't worthy, it wouldn't have budged at all. Ultimately, Rogers preferred to have his strongest teammate at his peak. Mjolnir, at that point, wasn't his to wield, and it's a decision that ultimately pays off come Endgame, with Thor having grown as a character and even subtly confirming Steve's gesture by proclaiming he always knew Cap was worthy enough to wield it. It's a great moment, and one that confirms Russo's earlier question. Steve was always worthy because that's who he is deep down. He may not have always made the right decision over the years, but there's no denying that Captain America is beholden to all the values Mjolnir represents. It might not be the most elaborate theory, but Steve Rogers is able to wield Thor's hammer simply because he's worthy enough to do so. Just as he was in the comics, the MCU Steve has mountains worth of history to prove that is the case. So even if the moment did manage to blindside everyone during their first watch, maybe we should have expected it to happen all along. And that was our little video on why Captain America was worthy enough to wield Thor's hammer in Avengers Endgame. I want to know what you guys thought at the moment down in the comments below, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and head back on over to whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every day. As always, I've been Ewan. You can follow me on Twitter at EwanRuinsThings. I'll see you next time. Bye!
Did you know that What Culture also does a board game? It's true, we do. And you can purchase it at shop.whatculture. Who knows, I might even sign a copy or two to devalue them a little bit.